welcome back. We have Evan Hudson here with us today. I'm so excited. This is one of those opportunities where we get to meet new people in looking for network partners and others who are doing amazing work. I'm going to let Evan talk for themselves. I'm going to get off the stage. And Evan, if you need any help, I am here, I am listening, and I can pop back in at any point in time.
Right on. Thank you so much. I'd like to start by saying I'm really grateful to be here. Like, this is a huge honor to be sharing the stage with you all. Everyone across Turtle Island who's doing great work. I'm going to figure out if I can share my screen here. Share. All right. Hopefully that's working. All good? All right. I'm going to assume that it's good. And if it's not, please let me know. All right. So this presentation, well, is called Yaya's Angels. And it's about an experiment that I did last year in using social media to distribute naloxone. I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself. My name's Evan Hudson. I work in what is currently known as Dubuque, Iowa, which is located on unceded Sauk, Meskwaki, and Fox land. Dubuque, right where Illinois and Wisconsin and Iowa meet, on the banks of the Mississippi. And so this presentation basically is about how I think social media can be a potent tool for getting the word out about harm reduction services. So I'm going to tell you what I did last year, what I learned from that, and how it might be useful. So basically, near the end of last summer, I was looking at Twitter. I had recently gotten a big box of naloxone. And I'm pretty sure that what I did is technically not totally illegal because I have no certification per se. So I'm not going to tell who I got the naloxone from. But basically, I got, 1,100 doses of naloxone. When I was looking at Twitter, I saw a post that said that basically there's a warning about fentanyl-laced weed. And I'm a little bit skeptical about marijuana being laced with fentanyl, because a lot of the reports I've seen aren't necessarily tested. But in any case, I decided to use that opportunity to see if anyone needed naloxone. So I made a post asking if anyone wanted me to send them some, and logged out. And then the next day when I got back on Twitter, I had like hundreds of messages. So my inspiration in sending this out by mail is actually a person who spoke earlier today. So that's a huge honor for me to be talking about the same work that Tracy did, and also next. So shout out to Tracy Helton. In fact, in 2017, I was living in New Orleans, and I was in kind of a period of chaotic use of opioids.
All right. So looks like the screen cut Evan off right now. So we will have to get Evan back up and running. In the meantime, I'm going to dip into the back, and I am going to bring Adam and Joanne up next, who are going to present on some amazing community-based response. I believe it's in Indiana. I could totally be wrong. It might be Michigan. Everything is beginning to blur together, and I have not had lunch yet. Oh, Evan's back. So I'll bring Evan back then. All right.
Did it cut out, or what happened?
We lost you somehow, Evan, so I'm so sorry.
Oh no. Was I sharing the presentation and it cut out, or what happened?
Yep. Yeah, so we were about 3 slides into your presentation, and you were just quickly talking about you were acknowledging Tracy at Next Distro, and talking about how she saved your life while you were in Norway.
Well, hopefully it works this time. It didn't cut out on my end, but take 2. I'm going to try it again. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So hopefully it's still going, but
yep, anyway, I can see you.
You can see it? Can everyone see me?
Yes, I'm going to just hang here in silence whilst you do your thing.
Right on.
All right.
So anyway, male distributed naloxone is it's the next wave. It's all the rage. So here's what happened. First off, I'd like to say that if I were doing this again, I'd probably do some stuff differently. First off, I didn't really think I'd be presenting about this or writing about it for an audience, so I didn't keep really any records. And I over the last year or so, social media, I decided it's not necessarily something I want to be giving my energy to, so I deleted the Twitter and Reddit accounts I was using to send this out, so I don't have access to the DMs or posts. So any numbers that I say about exactly how many kits I sent out are kind of an estimate. And I think the other thing is that I didn't really think at the time about the legality of mailing naloxone, which is a prescription drug all around the country. So it's probably, if I were going to be doing this for some kind of a grant or a study or something, I'd want to secure the appropriate licensure and certification. But with that said, it was a success. First place, as I mentioned, that I tried this out was on Twitter.
Evan, one last little thing. I'm so sorry. Your presentation isn't showing, and everyone's like, I really want to see the slides. So we're gonna do it. We're gonna make it work. Ought not be organized. Life should be dogs and kids. There we go. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sorry about that, guys. All right. So assuming that we are on and everything's working. All right. So basically, what the next step after I sent out that initial post, it absolutely blew up. It must have been a viral thread or something, because I had like 500 plus DMs, and which is great. I was just a little bit unprepared for that size of response. And my first step was kind of triaging according to figure out who had the need and who had the more urgent need. And so my method for doing that was simply just talking to people and figuring out kind of what their situation was. One of the main issues was that a lot of people were maybe not particularly in the drug community, or maybe they just had marijuana and they were afraid that their weed was laced with fent and stuff like that. So it was great that people who weren't necessarily in the drug using community were interested, but I only had limited time and resources, so I wanted to find the people who had like an urgent need. So a lot of people said, I want to be involved. Can you send me some naloxone? But if they weren't, either they didn't use drugs or weren't in immediate contact with people who use drugs, what I usually did was I connected them with their local needle exchange or Next Distro or some other their public health department and so forth. But other people, and quite a few people, I provided with direct services, which meant that I mailed them kits containing naloxone and intramuscular syringes and instructions on how to use them. So here's a sample of a conversation that I would have in the DMs of my Twitter, or later Reddit and Facebook. So one thing people were usually pretty concerned about was if I was scamming them, like if I wanted them to send me their password to their Twitter or their bank account or something, or if I was the feds. Like that was a real concern, is that people are a little bit sketchy about self-identifying as drug users in like America, which is a police state. So that is a very legitimate concern. But after I let them know that I was not the feds and I would not share their information with anyone, and then I would usually ask them, if they use drugs or if they know if they're in close contact with someone who used drugs. And a lot of people said either they themselves use drugs or they were in close contact. For example, their roommates, their close friends, their family members. And so at that point, I had established that they did indeed have a need. So I would ask about their familiarity with naloxone. A lot of people either had used it or had seen it used or were at least familiar with it. But even so, I wanted to make sure that if the naloxone got to them, then they would be able to use it safely. So I'd answer their questions, kind of give them a quick rundown, but also send them to some, a website and YouTube videos explaining how to use naloxone. And the next piece of information that I was trying to get is how many people they would give it to. How many people did they know that were in need of it? So that would help me choose whether to send them just one or a few kits for a single person, or a big box of naloxone, right? For people, if they were like, yeah, I can hand it out to 20 people and each of them can hand it out to more, then I'd send them like 10, 15 kits. I don't know exact numbers on this. Like I said, I didn't keep records, but this was like a thing that went on for a couple months in fall 2020. I would take orders and write down addresses and then fill up my car with boxes and go and mail them. And I know I started with more than 1,000 vials and I used them all. So at least 75 to 100 mailings. With the best part for me was that there are several repeat recipients and people who ended up kind of making this a regular thing and supplying their community, especially in rural areas or areas where there's higher barriers to accessing these services. So that was really cool. And then a lot of people also, even if I didn't send them naloxone directly, then they used it to get in touch with their local harm reduction organization or needle exchange, what have you. So takeaway from this, my thesis was that social media is a good way to find people in need of naloxone. So round 2, I thought, well, I'm going to try this out again. I went to Reddit. And back in the day when I was using heroin, I was on R opiates, and I saw Tracy doing great work on that. But one thing I thought about was that these research chemical opioids like U47700, isotonitazine, and the other etazines are at that time pretty popular. I think they've started to outlaw them more and more, but still it's a big issue. And Reddit is a community where it's discussed, and people talk about different suppliers and so forth. So I made some posts on subreddits like our research chemicals, drugs, dissos, etc. I didn't get as many people responding to the posts, but the thing is, every person that did respond to my posts were people who were in need of naloxone. And so just like on Twitter, I had some really great conversations with people. And one thing that struck me was that a lot of the people that I reached out to, both on Twitter and Reddit, and then later Facebook, were people that really cared about keeping not just themselves, but their community safe. And they said, oh yeah, I'd hand it out to a bunch of people, make sure that my friends are safe, and so forth. So, and this mirrors what I've heard in the literature. There's a really cool article by Jeff Baithji that talks about how harm reduction programs enable altruism, so that when people participate in these programs, they don't just keep themselves safe, but the secondary distributors end up benefiting their community. It helps give them an empowering identity. So that was really beautiful for me to facilitate that. The next place I looked was Facebook. And so I posted in a group called Dank Recovery and some other drug or psychedelic related groups. And surprisingly, the posts were almost all removed pretty quickly by moderators. I guess it violated community guidelines, or they wanted to avoid liability and so forth. But we still got a few respondents. And out of those few respondents, I ended up making some really cool connections, especially with people who belong to communities that might not access health services otherwise. And several of them ended up becoming secondary distributors. It inspired them to start getting involved in harm reduction, start volunteering. One thing that was especially meaningful to me was connecting with what's called the dirty kid community. And I know it sounds like a bad term, but that's like kind of how they self-identify. And it's like traveling unhoused and especially unhoused youths. And so during my period I was a heroin user for about 9 years. I was kind of on the periphery of this community, and it really made me feel good to connect with some people in this community. So, for example, if they were staying in kind of like a squat house, there was one house in New Orleans, and they had enough to give to everyone in the house, who would then go out and give to their friends and so forth. And almost immediately there was reports of overdose reversals. Like literally, one guy said the day that the naloxone got there, people are overdosing from a bad batch, and they were able to put it to use immediately. And that was a pattern that people would sometimes check in days, weeks, months later, but say, "Hey, man, I used your Narcan to bring my friends back." And so that was really powerful. How was it funded? Because it's not cheap sending all this stuff out. Each kit was, $6-7, and for the big ones, $20. And I can proudly say that Uncle Sam gets the credit for this one. I lost my job to COVID in March 2020, so I was getting all these CARES Act payments, and a benefit of this was that it helped me feel good about taking this money from the government and putting it to good use. So the second way, it's from my dear sweet grandma. We call her Yaya because that means grandma in Greek. My grandma makes angels out of seashells, and she has the project to distribute them to as many people who would take them, to bring good luck, good fortune, good health, and so forth. And so she asked me if I'd be willing to send out some of these angels to people along with the Narcan. And I said, well, sure, why not? So I would ask people if they minded if I would send them along some angels. And most people were amped on it. They're like, hell yeah, dude, send me some angels. I'll hand them out. Now, it's a little bit complicated because it might be inappropriate to distribute faith-based items, and angels are technically, a spiritual thing, to strangers and as part of a public health program. But I did ask, and it also taught me that, in order to secure funding, we got to we make compromises sometimes. And I would also add that I don't know exactly how to put this, but to me, I think there's a spiritual element in harm reduction work. And as we are reaching out, it's a powerful thing to make a human connection. And especially in this climate, there's an ongoing genocide on drug users to show solidarity. And these angels were meant as tokens of good luck, good health. A lot of people said, oh, it reminds me of my friend. It reminds me of my grandma, my friend who passed away, etc. People seem to like them. So here's a picture of Yaya with a map of the places that her angels had been sent. And here is a diagram of angels. So if anyone needs any angels, you can reach out to me, and I will send you a box of angels while supplies last for free. So looking back on this in retrospect, I would say this was a positive experience, and also one from which we can draw lessons. I distribute a whole bunch of naloxone, reached dozens of clients, and even ones who I didn't send naloxone to are able to connect with their local services or help them get hooked up with naloxone from other national organizations. I think just like the rest of harm reduction work, one of the most valuable things was the human connection that I made. And what blew my mind was when Tracy earlier said that she had talked to a 12-year-old whose dad used naloxone. I was wondering, did I talk to that same kid? Because I had that same conversation where I think it was about a 12-year-old kid reached out and said, my dad uses heroin. He overdoses all the time. I'd really like to have some naloxone in the house. And that was just one example, but there were dozens of examples where people would kind of give me a brief rundown of their situation, what they were going through. And in addition to just talking to them about how to use naloxone, I could talk to them about what they're going through and give my perspective and my background as someone who uses drugs, I was able to make them feel less alone. And I think there's value inherent to that as well. And also, several people reached out and said that they had reversed overdoses, which is always a trip to me, to think that there's someone walking around and continuing to draw breath from the medicine that I distributed. And as someone who overdosed myself, that's a powerful thing indeed. So takeaways being, I think this is a model that could be leveraged. I think it's an effective way to spread the word about naloxone distribution and harm reduction services in general. There's already great services that exist, like Next, Remedy Alliance, and local organizations, but the issue is that a lot of times people don't know about them, whether it's the local exchange or what have you, or sometimes people know about them but just think they're like intimidated to reach out. They don't know how to go about it. There's still such a stigma attached to being a drug user that they don't want to kind of out themselves publicly. And so when I had these one-on-one conversations, I could kind of talk them through that or coach them through that process. And I've always thought the tenet of harm reduction, of meeting people where they're at, is really powerful, because it's not just like a geographic thing. It's a meeting them on the same wavelength and meeting them in the same spaces. And in 2022, like, everyone is at the internet or at social media. So it seems to me like the key is finding these online spaces and conversations where people who use drugs are looking at whether it's a post on Facebook or a reply chain on Twitter or whatever. If you find these places where people are likely to see them, then it has the potential to get the word out about harm reduction. Now, if I were going to do this for a study or something, a program, a community health program, I would do it differently. I think I was kind of winging it. It would be probably good to have a protocol built and secure the appropriate licensure. But my vision, I believe, if there were a team of kind of people who are doing this, probably not that often but just if there were people who were dedicated to using social media to spread the word about harm reduction, it could probably increase the amount of people who reach out to harm reduction services, and it wouldn't take a whole lot of money or effort, and it could potentially be a tool to end this filthy war on drugs that kills so many great people. So shout out to the people who wrote about this already, especially Dan Big, who started the whole thing. And please reach out if you're interested in collaborating, or if you just want to talk, or if you need some seashell angels. I'm the plug, so hit me up.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Evan. I know that was really difficult to get through with all of the sort of discombobulation that happens. So way to hang in there, buddy.
Did it work out?
It worked out. We're all here with you. We're all listening. People are so thrilled. And I don't know, I don't want to speak for everyone, but when, I saw that picture of your grandma holding the map, like that is harm reduction. That is heart-centered. That is a redistribution of resources. That is about less suffering. That is about connection. Like, that is the heart. That's why we're here. So thank you for letting us witness that and feel connected to it. I really, really appreciate that so much. There is one question before we pop off for our next folks from Naxostuching neighbors. And it was, do you plan to continue distribution?
Yeah, I mean, most of my distribution right now is locally centered, and because frankly, just sending stuff is expensive, but I would really like to continue. And when sometimes I'll still make posts on social media, but what I do now is I just ask them where they're located in their general area, and then Google what harm reduction organizations are in their area and connect them that way, or send them to Next.
Amazing. Thanks Thanks,
Cool.
Evan. So there will be more information from Evan. There are a lot of people in the chat who want to connect with you. They all seem to want those angels and they want to pass them out.